Well, we are on. George, welcome to our webinar.
Pleasure to be here.
Yeah. We're waiting to for some more people to log on. Welcome everyone. Northport is already watching. Igor, how are you? Um, Everyone, Vitali and Mark, all of the leaders, good to see you guys. Paul in New York, hey bro. uh, Sergey, Stan is watching, Tim, Valery, welcome everyone. You guys are awesome. So we'll just spend a few minutes here, wait for more people to log on, and we'll go from there. Let's see here. I just want to make sure that everything is functioning well. If you guys have any questions at any time, um, send us the questions. We love questions. And as a matter of fact, we'll have some time towards the end to do Q&A. And hey, George is with us. How crazy this is. Uh, remember, George, I think I asked you about the webinar sometime last year,
Oh
right?
yeah, I
Hey,
promised you I'd be on, and here it is.
yeah, I remember I actually, what
That's
I did, I sent a few links just with my idea to actually a few text messages to some of the ministers that I respect, and I go, what do you think about this idea, and do you want to be a
that's
part of it?
yeah. I'm glad that you had the vision and the desire to do it, and I hope it helps people. I really do.
Yeah. Well, let's do a few announcements here while people are logging in before we kind of jump into our questions and all. Let me see if I can start sharing my screen here. So let's start with this. So you guys, next weekend, time flies by so fast. This weekend, May 3rd and 4th, there's going to be an amazing conference in Atlanta, Georgia. Uh, Nick is the youth leader there, and this is in Pastor Lantuk's church. They'll have some amazing speakers. They have planned an amazing conference. They'll have classes. They'll have different teachers, and as you see, lots of Chuk, Mish Flamenco, Mark Morozov, and a few music bands. It's going to be really, really powerful conference. So um, I know they encourage you to register, so if you already registered, way to go. If you didn't, why not? These guys are going to be doing some amazing job. I spoke with Nick multiple times, and they've been preparing a lot for you guys to have good experience. They've been praying, so God will speak to you. So listen, I encourage you to. It's not too late. Register, grab maybe a car or two, or maybe rent a bus and go out there. It's going to be a really fun conference. So go for that. Also, just kind of, let's see here, give you one more rundown. Just if you have some time, check out our website, iGrowLeaders.com, and you'll find all of the information here. Here's the information about the webinar that we're doing today, some other information. And then another thing, if you click on webinars, there's all of the past webinars. They're all here. So if you missed one, the recordings are here. You guys can go back and watch. And another cool thing is we have an event calendar, and everything is in one place. This was a conference last weekend in Seattle that we were a part of. Here's the information about this particular conference. So if you are interested, go to iGrowLeaders.com, go into the events page and scroll down, and you click on it. It will give you some more information, and there's the website, so you can click on it and go directly there, and you can register and get some more information about speakers and different classes and all of that. So they've planned a um, packed conference. I know it's going to be very, very cool. All right, so that's as far as that goes. Now, let's switch gears here. I see there's more people logging in. Let's see who's connecting here. Dima, welcome. Let's see who else. Cool deal. So a few more people logged in here. All right, you guys. I guess a few more announcements as you go onto the event page. There's going to be a youth camp in North Carolina, July 19th through 21st. You can have some information there about the youth camp. There's going to be another amazing conference in South River in August. It's going to be 16th and 17th of August. These guys are always, last year they did their conference and it was amazing. They did a really good job. So bring your youth. You know, those conferences are done for you guys to connect, have the youth come out and hopefully, you know, receive something from God and I don't know, maybe get married. So it's always good. You know where I'm going with, you know. And then Spartanburg, South Carolina, there's going to be a youth conference August 31st and September 1st. So that's that. Now, why do we do the webinars, right? Why are we on? Why do we have George on the webinar? Well, it's a simple thing. We want to influence and we want to impact and bring relevant material to all of our Slavic youth leaders. I think, you know, we can be so busy. I know there's a lot of information out there, but there's something to be said about, you know, someone that we can learn from that's our own, right? There's a lot of ministers, there's big American churches, and, you know, we can learn a lot of leadership stuff, but a lot of the stuff that we're going to be discussing today is pertaining to our, most of our culture, right? And doesn't matter how you know, you don't, maybe don't want to be a part of this culture, you are. You know, you're in the Slavic church, and at the end of the day, learning from someone like George that's been around ministry for all of his life and impacted so many people. What is it?
I'm ancient.
Hey, I'll tell you this much, and I'll get into this a little later. It, I think you have such a big father's heart that you find language, you know, you find a way to touch. You know, it doesn't matter what the age is. You can speak to the pastors, you can speak to bishops, and you can speak to regular, you know, people like me. And I've asked you so many times different questions, and you've connected. So yeah. I've been impacted by you. So the reason why we do it, because we want to bring the material and we want to inspire you. And hey, maybe there's someone here that's watching that's thinking, man, maybe I should give up on ministry and there's so many things going on. We're here to inspire you not to give up and hopefully give you some words of encouragement. And if you're here and maybe struggling with some kind of leadership thing or maybe something's going on in your church, we want to also touch on those things. So we want to be a part of your journey in your, you know, youth ministry, right? And me personally, and what we do at iGrowLeaders.com, we want to impact you. We want to spend time with you. We want to be on the phone with you and ask you some, maybe sometimes even tough questions. I've spent some time today with one of the leaders, and I was glad to connect with him and ask him questions about youth ministry and see where, you know, I can be of benefit. So that's that. So enough about us. Let's get into the topics that we have. So I just want to say a few things about George, all right? And then I'll ask him a few questions. He doesn't know about the questions I'm going to ask him, so get ready. So I remember I had some very challenging to me leadership questions about one of the topics we're going to talk about is the relationship with the senior pastor. And I remember I was driving George to South River for service. And I'm like, cool, I'm gonna have some, maybe an hour of George's time. He can't run away from me, you know, I'm gonna be asking him all of these questions. And we had probably one of the most important conversations about relationship with the senior pastor that I've had with anyone. And George, you don't know this, but since then, the words that you spoke to me during that time about the relationship with the senior pastor, I came across guys and even guys in our church that were asking me questions about that topic, and I go, well, I had this conversation with George. Here's what he told me. I've done it so many times. I've I mean, when I talk to youth leaders, I've used the principles and how the view that you kind of showed me as far as how to view my pastor. And I'm sure you're probably going to touch on that topic.
If I forget what I told you, you remind me.
Oh, well, you basically the premise of the conversation was that, Alex, you have to realize the gifts that your pastor has, and um, some of the things the pastor could be good at, some of the things he's not as gifted, and you have to understand it from that side and not get frustrated and all of that. So,
Yeah. Okay.
um, another cool story. I remember George was preaching at our church, and he was staying in a hotel not that far away from our church. And I remember a pastor calls me and says, "Hey, Alex, you're gonna have to pick up George. George, give him a call. Pick him up tomorrow for Sunday service." So I called George and I go, "Hey, I'll pick you up tomorrow. By the way, are you hungry?" And he goes, "Let me see. Well, I can probably use a sandwich." And I'm like, "Cool deal." My plan was to pull him out of the room so I can have 15, 20, maybe 30 minutes of his time to learn from him, ask him questions. And I call my friend Alex Novik. I go, "Alex, we have an opportunity to go and, spend some time with George." Yeah, remember that?
So
So
you brought a ton of food, and I was like in my pajamas already, and all these people show up. It just wasn't two of you; it was more. But it was
yeah, and Tanya, Alex's wife, was there as well, and I'm like, I think my wife was there as well, and we were like, "Come on,
exactly
this is
like
awesome time."
what?
So, guys, learn from me. If you have an opportunity, with
Uh,
someone like George, figure
food
out a
always
way.
works. Food, food always works. That's
Yeah,
awesome.
and we had a powerful conversation. We actually asked you some tough questions,
You did
uh, and it was powerful for us just to learn. So
the
thank you
fellowship.
so much.
You're
Yeah.
so welcome.
One more thing I want to say before we kind of jump into it, and George will kind of talk about this a little bit later on as well. George has done this curriculum with 7 videos that teach basically anyone how to preach. So I think it's a pretty cool resource from George, and we'll give you a little bit more information about that. And this is something that you can watch yourself, or maybe I know some churches have groups where they kind of come in and teach young guys how to preach. That's going to be a really, really powerful and good resource for you guys, and it comes from one of our own, and solid teaching and all of that. So we'll share about that a little bit later. Okay, George, let's jump into some of our stuff here that we want to talk about. So one of the one of the challenging topics that a lot of youth leaders kind of faced with is, how do I get I guess, good relationship with my senior pastor? You know, like for example, like me, I have all of these crazy ideas, and our church have to be making an impact, and why aren't we moving? And I have ideas with youth, and sometimes it's like maybe our pastor is a little bit different, right? And he gives us a lot more freedom. But I know so many other guys that they're kind of walking on eggshells and don't even know kind of what they can do and what they cannot do. And some rules are so strict. What would you say? Let's start this conversation. What would you say? What would be the best way to kind of find a really good relationship with, or develop good relationship with the senior pastor?
Thank you for the opportunity to address that question. That's a really tough question, and a lot of youth leaders feel like my senior pastor or my lead pastor, he doesn't get it. He's Slavic, right? Russian, Ukrainian, from the old country, FOB. He doesn't get it. And I have all these ideas. Yeah. Let me give you a secular example, but it's biblical. What I meant by secular, look at Daniel. Daniel was a young man full of vision, powerful young man taken to Babylon. His immediate boss, right, said you have to eat pork or some food that was forbidden, right? So what did Daniel do? He could say yes and compromise. He could say no and get his head cut off. What do you do when your pastor is not understanding what you're all about and you're not understanding what he's all about? Well, what did Daniel do? Daniel wanted to find out the goal of his immediate boss and his boss's boss. And the goal was that the young men would eat well, be healthy, and be able to function in their responsibility. You see, we have to function in the responsibility we're given first. That's called faithfulness. Before we act like we're the lead pastor and that we're going to teach the lead pastor what to do. Function in their goals first. Jesus put it another way. He said, if you're not faithful to serve another, who will give you your own? Your own what? Your own ministry. One of the greatest and most difficult lessons to learn as a leader under a leader, which is what youth leaders are in a Slavic context, is to understand how to serve the vision of their pastor above them. Now, I realize that maybe their worldview is narrow. I realize that they don't have the ideas to reach young people like you do. But first, why don't you sit down with your lead pastor, your senior pastor, but don't press him. Don't make him feel like you're interrogating him and you have an agenda. Sincerely ask him, Pastor, I've been praying for you. And I want to communicate to you that I want to be successful in my job. And my job is to serve the church and to serve you. What are the things that you would like to see happen? And I want to be a part of that so I can move along your vision. Do you know, when he really truly senses that you have a servant's heart and you truly serve that goal of his, whatever it is, it could be something simple, it could be something very basic, then you have earned the right to be heard. I think that we demand the right to be heard, but we have to earn it. I'll give you a real quick example from my own ministry. I began singing with my older sister. She was 9 years older, and her husband, 11 years older. And then Polchaniewicz, that was John Rosita Popovich, and Polchaniewicz, who was 6 years older. So I was 16, and they were 21 and 25 and 27. So you imagine the age gap in maturity and all these things. I really didn't have much decision making. However, I did have some input. And the Lord taught me to be obedient. There were some things I didn't like. There's something I didn't want to do. But as I did them, I began to have success in what I did. And they just were giving me more responsibility because it's your success that causes your boss or your leader to entrust you with more responsibility, obviously. Then as I got older, and then I took the church, I served the church and I served a bunch of people. I gave up ministering, and do you know it was only at age 38, almost 39? Look how much later that God gave me my own ministry. And that's what I've been doing since 1982 to this very, very day. You will not be affected in your ministry until you learn how to serve the ministry of someone else. And you need to verbally tell your lead pastor you're committed to him. Another thing you would ask is what are the fears? What are you afraid of, Pastor? I want to see if we can avoid that fear. Oh, I'm afraid the young people are going to go to the American church. I'm afraid that you're going to go into the world. I'm afraid you're going to do something crazy. Well, commit that you're going to protect the sheep that are given to you. You look at the examples of faithfulness. You look at David with his father's sheep. Do that. You're looking at Daniel in that situation. And then he proposed a creative alternative where he met the goals of his boss, that the kids look better than the other guys who are eating pork and all this bad food. So serve, commit, ask their goals. Spend time with your pastor. Take him to lunch. Put him at ease. It's not a relationship of tension or competition. Make it so that they're reassured in their heart. Because if you were the lead pastor and you have a 20-year-old or a 25-year-old in charge of your young people, you'd be concerned that they have your vision and the place you want to lead the sheep. Now, when it comes to Slavic pastors, they don't understand leadership concepts in terms of setting goals and administration. That's not their strong point. That's not their giftings, like I told Alex. They're limited to what God gave them. They never had Bible school. They don't have much literature. They go on the internet, they watch some YouTubes of pastors they like, but they have nowhere near the context, the education, the literature, the great speakers you could listen to on the internet. So be understanding of their limitations. One day you're going to be older. You're going to be 40, you're going to be 50, you're going to be 65 like me. And you're going to understand, like, they really love God and they're trying to be faithful to the level that they can. These are the things that I wanted to touch on. Find out your pastor's goal. See if you can reach them first. Commit verbally. Let him know. Show him by your actions. A servant's heart. Jesus came not to be served, but to serve and give his life a ransom for many. And that's an important thing. You're going to hear thunder and lightning. We're going through a thunderstorm here in Ozark, Missouri. So
Yeah.
something blips out, Either
George,
that or the Eagles are bowling upstairs. I don't know.
it's so true, is that just like you started out, I remember when I was kind of dissatisfied and just looking at things differently. And I remember our pastor said, it's one thing to understand the gifts of your pastor and the gifts that he has, and then maybe some of the gifts that he's lacking, right? And understanding that. But I remember when we had long conversations with my pastor. I've called him many times, and we had multiple conversations over an hour long each. And one of the things that he told me, and he goes, Alex, be faithful in your ministry. If you're in charge of youth, be faithful. Do it to 100%, right?
Yeah.
It's it's really not your job to get into the leadership of the church and tell me how to lead the church per se, right? Um, be responsible for what you have, 100%. Work with these people 100%. Impact those people. Pray for them. Encourage them and involve them and see the gifts that are in them. And he said it to basically to every ministry in church. If you do your work 100%, right, then everyone will be touched. The people will be growing spiritually, right? It's just the thing.
Exactly on that point. God put you there under that lead pastor. God has given you whatever ministry you have. And as you said, you're faithful to that. God promotes you. I mean, David started with sheep, and then he went to playing music for Saul when Saul was having fits. And then he went to battle, and he won the first battle with the giant. And I think David wanted to be faithful to Saul. It was Saul's poor attitude and jealousy that later on messed everything up. And then David had to run for his life. That does happen. But remember, we're serving the Lord, or excuse me, we're serving people in the name of the Lord. In other words, the Lord is our ultimate boss, but the Lord works under authority. Remember that the centurion, he said to Jesus, you don't have to go to my house. Now, notice the phrase he used. He says, because I also am a man under authority. In other words, he realized that Jesus did miracles because he didn't come in his name. He came from God. And Jesus was under the authority of God. And if you look at all the sayings of Jesus about his ministry, you'll hear him say many times, I'm not speaking my word. I'm not doing my will. I didn't come here to do my will. I came to do the will of the Father. So if the Son of God can serve the ministry of someone above him, that gives him authority. So we're under God and we're under a lead pastor. Even myself, I'm still under authority. When I go to youth services, I don't preach what I want. I ask God, what am I supposed to preach? And then God gives me a word, and then I have authority because I'm under authority. If we act like we don't have an authority or we're the ultimate authority, there's something I learned as a young man. And it's from the book of Ecclesiastes. It's from the Living Bible. It's not word for word. It's not literal, but it's a paraphrase. And I never forgot it because it's alliterative. In other words, it uses the same letter. Here it goes. The self-sufficient fool falls flat on his face. God convicted me so many times that verse because I was confident. I had giftings. I was a young man with some intelligence and ability. And yet when I acted self-sufficiently, I acted like a fool and I fell flat on my face. Remember that.
And I think you touched on this. When Jesus was under authority, remember that he spent so much time with his father, and he had a very strong relationship with his father. And I think if we kind of draw that same parallel, I think a lot of times what we're lacking is relationship, like
Yes, ma'am.
pure,
Yes, ma'am.
pure. So talk a little bit more about, how do you, I know you said that, hey, take a pastor out to lunch. Well, I've heard expressions that, look, I really don't need, let's say, to meet with, with the leaders, or if they signed up for ministry, come on, let's get it done. There's no need to talk about it,
No,
right?
that's
Talk
right.
about how do we build this relationship? Because I think, correct me if I'm wrong, I think a lot of the issues could be resolved
Yes.
purely, they just dissolve if you have good relationship. Talk
Here's a
about
good
that.
question. Here's a good question. Why did Jesus call 12 disciples? They weren't apostles yet. They were students, disciples. Jesus had 70, right? Um, Jesus had more than that. 5,000 men came to listen to his messages. But Jesus called 12 disciples. And Mark tells us why. In order to be with him.
Mm.
The Son of God, Jesus Christ, he chose 12 earthly men so that they could travel together for 3+ years, that they could watch him preach, listen to him teach, watch him do the miracles. Then he gives them authority in his name, and he said, now you go out and do what I showed you to do. And then they went out in his name, and they preached the good news. They cast out demons. They came back all excited. Lord, the demons are subject to us in your name. He said, yeah. And he rejoiced. And then he told them, and he gave them priorities. He said, that's not the main thing. The main thing is that your name is written in the Lamb's Book of Life. In other words, don't get a swelled head that, demons are running because they're scared of the name of Jesus. But Jesus called these men to be with him. Of the 12, Jesus chose a special 3, Peter, James, and John. Peter and 2 brothers. And it was those that he took up to resurrect somebody. And it was those 3 guys that he took on the Mount of Transfiguration to show them his glory. Then First John writes about it in the book of First John. We are witnesses. Peter writes about it. We are witnesses. We saw it. So from the 12, he had an inner circle of.
Let's see if we lost George or not. Oh, give me a second, you guys. Let's see if he's still on. Can you guys send me in chat if you guys see George or if he's gone? Yep, George is offline. Give me a second. Let's just wait for him. I'll send him a text message. They're going through a rough weather out there. Let's see here. Are you able to relog in? Hey, don't you guys love just dictating the text? Okay, George is calling. Hey, George.
My internet went out, electricity, and I'm in the dark right now.
Oh,
So,
boy.
yeah,
Well,
yeah. I
oh,
apologize. Oh, I'm back.
very interesting.
All right.
Wow. So,
All right. Whoa. Well, okay. I'm on my phone. I'm on my phone. So here, let's see if I can do
by the way, you
this.
guys, check this out. George said that he's 65. Look how quick he was with the technology. This is like, come on, George, you're up there. That's pretty cool. Let's see, we were losing you again.
Yes, I am. I phone number zero connection, so everything's okay.
Okay, yeah, looks like it's breaking up a little, but maybe it's going to be better. Cool deal.
I'm doing the best I can here. No electricity.
I know that's crazy.
But Santana.
Oh boy. Well, we were talking about relationship with the pastor. You're fine. We can see you a little
Yes.
bit. Can you hear me okay?
Okay. Yeah,
Can you hear me?
you're perfect. You're perfect.
All right. So
Yeah,
you were
you're perfect.
talking about relationship with the pastor. Um, so I don't know if you want to finish the thought or we're just
I think
I'll just
that Jesus called the 12 to be with him. And it's so important because he took three of those on special occasions in the Mount of Transfiguration. Um, he took them when he raised a certain person from the dead. Everybody didn't go with Jesus in every single place. And I think that time spent with Christ really served them, really helped them, really taught them. Because actually, um, Peter writes, we walk in his steps. Even the words that Jesus said, follow me, right? Follow me. What did Jesus have in mind? He had in mind that we're to walk where Jesus walked, we're to follow in his footsteps. I think that look at the good things your lead pastor does. Look at the good things that the senior pastor does. Look at the great example of prayer or commitment or time and follow those examples.
yeah.
And again, relationship is a lot. If you don't go to lunch at least once a month or 2 months, something's wrong. Not just meetings, because you're going to have meetings, you're going to have committee meetings, you're going to have a board meeting. That's not that's not relationship time.
Yeah.
Going to a restaurant and paying for it is well worth the investment.
And I've heard so many times, I'm like, Pastor, come on, let's go out. He's like, well, we'll have bratska. We'll see.
Yeah, yeah. They know that. They know that. They know. But don't forget too that they have a comfort level that is old school. And then, our culture is like, whoa, it's like threatening a little bit. So try to de-escalate the culture difference. Here, let me tell you a story. There was a very conservative church, right? And so they had the piano in one corner of the church on the right hand side. And people said, let's move that piano. It'd be better on the left hand side. And they took a committee vote on it. They voted no. But slowly, the people wanted to have a little bit of progress here. They moved the piano an inch at a time. And by the end of the year, it was on the left hand side. And warm up the water slowly so the frog doesn't jump out. Move the piano slowly so you get your goal. Yeah, be patient. You're not going to change your pastor, just because you want him to change.
So, guys, I want to remind you, send in your questions. I know some of the guys already sent some questions. We'll have Q&A at the end. George, I think just a little bit more on this topic, right? I think the responsibility is ultimately is on our generation, right? Because some of our pastors, they're more or less set in their ways, and I don't know if you can change my, right? But I think the
Yes.
responsibility lays on us. We have to reach out and build a relationship and find a
Yes.
common ground on a lot of questions. But what I've been telling youth leaders, right? Sometimes I ask youth leaders, hey, well, how much do you spend time with one-on-one with leaders on your team? And a lot of times I don't have a positive answer. And youth leaders are so focused and busy with just a lot of things day to day, and they don't delegate a lot of stuff, right?
Right.
They're really, really busy. And what are we doing? We're repeating the
Yeah.
steps that our current leadership that we maybe have challenges with and don't have a good relationship with. We're repeating the same thing. And my call to all of the youth leaders, and I've been talking about this with many of them, I said, you really need to learn how to delegate a lot of things that someone else can do. I'm like, a lot of times I would say, you're robbing someone else of their blessing because they have gifts and
Yeah.
God gave them those gifts and they can help you in those
Yeah.
gifts, right?
Yeah.
But your job is to delegate it and then spend time on building that relationship with your team
Yes.
so you don't repeat those steps of the pastor. Um, let me ask you this question. Um, what does a youth leader do if they, let's say, want a little bit more progressive service, youth service, for example, right? And like, how do you approach that when you want more progressive? Maybe someone wants to do worship, or maybe they want some live music on stage and things like that. What would you say? If they
You know
have those.
what? Sometimes young people want it all. It's all or nothing. So let me give you actual examples. Actual examples. So they want to lower the lights, and some people just no to temnota. What are you doing? It's darkness. We are children of the light. Listen, it's not that important to darken the auditorium. It's fun. It's nice. But if you get kickback or feedback on that, that's negative. That's not important. Then, does it have to be that loud? We like loud, but
I love
you know what?
love.
Yeah, but I don't mind loud. My wife tells me to tone the music down. She said, "Are you deaf?" I said, "No, I just like loud music." But that's me.
Yeah,
But it doesn't have to be loud, okay? And then be appropriate. I mean, be appropriate when however you dress. Don't wear torn jeans on a worship team in the church. I mean, you can wear that when you go out with your wife or something, but don't do it on the stage. In other words, we pick battles. Don't make battles that are unnecessary battles. In other words, pick your battles. Fight for the things or argue for the things that are legitimate, that your pastor he can actually say, well, you know what, you have a point there. You have a point there. He's never going to complain if you pray. He's never going to complain if you commit and you're serving. He's never going to complain if you take the youth to visit some elderly people or the old folks home or things that are legit. In other words, we don't have to copy Hillsong. They're great, but that's Australia. Their lead pastor, he loves that. Maybe yours doesn't. You're not Hillsong. You're your local church in your local state or your local area. So don't fight the battles that are not necessary to fight, because those battles are usually cultural. And there's a cultural clash of identity from people from the old country who want to repeat that here, and then from you that, like me, were born in this country. Honestly, I've had to tone down my ministry a lot to serve people who otherwise wouldn't have me. Am I compromising? No. Apostle Paul said, I've become all things to all people so that I may win some. Show your heart more than your ideology.
mm,
Show your spirit more than your philosophy. Because actually, it's going to change anyway. What you think at 19 is going to change at 25. What you think at 25 is going to change at 35, and so forth and so on. And I know you can't climb into the mind of a 50 or 60-year-old pastor. I know that. But bless him. Honor God. It's not so important to get all the things done that you think are so important. Major in the majors, don't major in the minors. That's my advice.
What do you do?
Yeah.
What do you do if someone, let's say a youth leader, is had a dispute with the pastor, right? And they're offended. Let's say they really
Who's
don't
offended?
even.
Who's offended?
The
The
youth
youth?
leader is offended, and he doesn't even want to go out for lunch. What do you do in that situation?
Okay. My question is, why would a youth leader get offended? In other words, how would Jesus handle that lead pastor? If Jesus was a youth, Jesus was 12 years old, and his mother and father said, "What are you doing here? Come home now." He said, "Okay." And he went with his mom and his dad. This is the Son of God as a teenager or a preteen. Why in the world will we get offended with the lead pastor? How about if we serve? How about if we say, "Hey, it's not about my feelings," okay? I don't think we should get offended. It would be a very rare circumstance. A legitimate offense be if they attack your dignity or your self-worth, or they call you names, or they betray you in some way. That's a real offense that would hurt, okay, anybody. But a lot of things we're offended about is because we don't get our way, you know. So a 2-year-old turns blue and stamps his feet. Is that how we're going to act? I hope I'm not offending. You thought I'm going to be offending.
So let's say a youth leader has a lot of great ideas how to move the youth forward and go out and reach Americans, and you know, going into the second question, having English services or maybe translation on the stage, like how, and let's say if the youth leader is asking.
I got it. I got the gist of your question. To save time, I'll answer it. Make a wise appeal. You can learn from Esther, who was a woman. You could learn from Abigail, who was a woman. You could learn from Daniel, who was a man. When they had something they wanted to either instruct or get across to their very resistant leaders above them. Ahasuerus, for example, Esther's husband, he was terrible. He was horrible. He wouldn't listen to anybody. He'd kill you. If you came in his presence without the scepter, and you're dead. She was so wise in her appeal. Okay, so it doesn't matter if you're a man or a woman in this case. It's not the femininity that convinced them. It was the methodology, the creativity. They looked for a way to even Moses, when he prayed to God, the ruler of the universe, is ready to wipe out the Israelis. They've made a golden calf. God said, "That's it. I will destroy them." Now Moses has to convince God that it's not a good idea. What does Moses do? He said, "For your sake, don't do it. For the sake of your people, what are they going to say about you?" I think that the ideas that youth leaders have, let's say a second English service, I think they have a time, and you have to kind of prepare your lead pastor for that. And here's one more thing I want to say, it's very important. The book of Proverbs says, "The heart of the king is like a river of water in the hands of the Lord. He turns it which way he wants." Who? God. So if your idea is legitimate and it is about the time to do it, get on your knees. Ask the Lord to speak to your immediate leadership, to your immediate pastor. And the Lord will come and put that on his heart, or make him at least softer and amenable to your suggestion. You see, when we want to do the will of God, don't tell the lead pastor, "You're out of the will of God. I have the will of God." go to your pastor's boss, which is the Lord, and say, Lord, I feel this is of you and it's the time. How do I do that? And ask God, and he'll show you, like he did all of those people I mentioned, Esther, Abigail, the wife of Nabal, who was a fool, right? That's a terrible example. David, who was under Saul, Daniel, who was under the king of Babylon and his immediate superior, and look for a creative alternative or a way that God can speak to their hearts. When I was a 16-year-old boy, my dad didn't want me to go on a mission trip. Well, I prayed that night, and the Lord came to him in a dream, and the next morning he let me go on a mission trip. That was my father. Yeah. And I came back after 3 months. I said, Dad, I said, why did you say no? And then you said yes. And I used this in one of my messages. He said, son, the Lord showed me a dream. I saw a long, slender green tree, and it was so flexible I could bend it. And I bent it actually in half. And I heard a voice from heaven saying, why are you bending that young green tree? Let him grow straight. Let him grow straight. So in other words, I was in the will of God. I appealed to my authority. My authority said no. I prayed to my authority's authority, God, and God said, let him go. And I went, 16 years old. So I'm not telling you to do something I didn't do. I sang with older people. I fulfilled and I served their heart first. And the other things came.
Yeah. We're going to move to another topic here. But someone replied here. They said, oh boy, lunch once a month with the pastor.
Sounds like they don't want to.
So let's switch gears here because we have a lot of questions here about the future of the church and all of that. And there's some other questions that we get to. So let me segue into it. I remember once we were driving and I remember the passion, and you said, and this was years ago, right? We didn't even have translation in our church, or maybe we were just starting to translate into English. You go, Alex, the youth is moving. They're not standing still. Let's say if the youth is moving at 15 miles an hour, why is the church standing still? Or maybe the church is like moving at like 3 miles an hour. We're losing them. Alex, you guys need translation. I remember you were so passionate about this. Let's talk about this. Let's talk about the future of our bilingual churches.
One of the best authorities on this subject is Alex Peckham. We were just at the conference here in Seattle, in Tacoma, and one of the workshops was the bilingual church. And I sat in that workshop, and Alex Peckham led it. And he said something so wise. I want to quote him. He said, we went to an English service and a Russian service, but we did not make it completely radical. Let me explain. He said, we can take all the youth out of the Russian service, and just Russian people are there, which are older people, middle-aged and older, but there's no youth. It's sad. Then we can have an all English service and no older people there, no Russians, only people who are speaking English, and then a few older people speak English rather. He said, but you know what? We told some of the young people to commit to both services so that the Russian service would not have a radical absence of youth. Okay? And I think that's a really important thing. Side-by-side translation is better than earphones or headphones, because when a person puts headphones on, they feel like they're disconnected. That is an emergency measure if there's no other way, or there's only 2 people or 3 to use the headphones, and it's a viable method, correct? But until you get to dva potoka, или 3 potoka, in other words, 2 services that are different, one Russian, one English, it's good to have side by side. In the 10 years I pastored, we used side by side. In fact, I preached in Ukrainian using American notes, and they translated me into English. It was really interesting. And then in youth services and on Saturday nights when we had big services or like anniversary services, I preached in English and they translated me into Ukrainian because our church was Ukrainian. But we never lost young people, and we even had Americans get saved, and we baptized in our church. They stayed as members of our church. So we kept both. I know we want a modern church. I know we want everything to be so hip and cool and up to date. Um, the thing I'm passionate about is ministering to both groups of people. You know. Now, another thing that has to be said, Slavic churches have a shelf life like food. They're only going to last 40 to 50 years. Like it, don't like it. This last immigration, let's call it from the Soviet Union, right? In the 80s and late 90s up until today, that's not the first immigration of Slavic people. That's the fourth. The first one was in 1917 on. Second was in 1950. My parents came after World War II through Germany, right? And then some through South America. The South Americans were the third immigration in the 70s and 80s. And then you guys from the Soviet Union were the fourth. So I have seen the shelf life of the first generation. I was dedicated in the Ukrainian church in New York City. It's called Cooper Square, right? It's probably called First Ukrainian Assembly of God, but it was on Cooper Square. In 54, when I was a couple of months old, my dad and my mom dedicated me, and they were the first immigrants in that church, Pastor Hutzaluk. Then I've seen that generation all die and go to the American church. They're gone. Second generation, my dad's generation, they're gone. They're gone. The South American generation, they stayed in a couple of churches, and they're considered the old immigrants, right? And then your generation, the Soviet immigrants, are the new. But it's a shelf life, 40, 50 years. So it's like a train that left one train station and it's headed to the next, but you can't go back to the train station you left from, okay? And you haven't reached the end of the line either. So you're in transition, and not to lose this amazing bunch of young people, you've got to minister to them without losing ministry to the people who are still sheep and still need to be fed, right? One more thing. I'm saying a lot of things, but I want to get it in before we finish. John chapter 21, Peter gets restored. He gets his guilt taken out. Jesus asked him if he loves him 3 times. But I want to bring out one powerful teaching. And it's so simple, Alex, so simple. Remember when Jesus said, feed my sheep 3 times? Okay. Notice the words and notice the priority. He didn't say sheep the first time. He said, literally, first, feed my lambs. Then he said, tend my sheep. Then he said, feed my sheep. The lambs are the young sheep, the children. And Jesus puts children, preteens, and teens as the first priority to eat, to have food. I think it's a shame that kids sit in church 10 years old, 12 years old, and hear a Russian speaker, and they're texting or drawing or doodling or daydreaming with glass eyes. I think that's a shame. That's what I'm passionate about. We got to reach that generation. I've done 10 preteen conferences for that very reason, all in English. So, yeah, that's the priority. But don't blow out the old people either. Look for a way to creatively involve their heart as well.
George, what do you think a youth leader should do when, let's say, members of their youth are leaving for an American church?
Relationships, reach out to them. Is this a permanent move? I know the programs are better. I know sometimes the preaching is better. The praise and worship music is better. There's child care. Some people will never come back, Alex. Some people will never come back. And that's a reality, okay? It's like a restaurant. They're going to go where the food is better. But the people who remain, take it on as a ministry, not at the sacrifice of your teenagers, okay? All right? Because there you're going to have to make a real strong decision. Unless you have a strong youth ministry, don't lose your kids. So I don't want to go on record as saying, it's okay that they go to another church, but save your kids. And if that's possible through a Slavic environment, that's the better way to go. If it's not, well, every family makes their own decision. Go to those people and say, is there anything we can do to have you come back? And if there is, try to do that. But usually by that time it's too late. Hopefully we don't get to that point, Alex. We've got to be proactive and
And what would you do? What would
that
you
to
do to be?
pastors as well. Now, if they say, no, nechai idut, pust idut. Well, not much you can do, not much I can do. And this webinar is not going to help you for that. It's just
Let's jump
the
into
reality.
some of the questions here. So I know you kind of touched on this, but the question is from the first immigration, how many of those churches are still left that are still Slavic? Do you know of
A
any?
handful, a handful. And they're mostly old people that still are alive, and they have an old preacher, and somebody comes and visits them and encourages them. But the churches that are viable or that are alive are all Soviet immigration churches, or mostly Soviet. When I say Soviet, you know what I mean by that.
Mm.
But they're not
And
Soviet model, but they came from the
yeah,
Soviet Union.
yeah. And
Да
guys, if you
здравствует Советский Союз.
have, oh
That's not what
boy,
I mean.
yeah.
Yeah.
Guys, if you have any other questions, submit them. I'm going through the list here and kind of asking George. Um, um, there's another, so in the same topic, in your opinion, what is the future of the Slavic churches within, let's say, next 10 years? What do you see?
I still think we can have amazing youth pastors become lead pastors. Your lead pastor is going to want to retire after 65, 70. And who is he going to ask to preach? He's going to ask you. He's going to ask you. Now, if not, well, then God has something else for you. But let me tell you what, I became a lead pastor at 29, and I led my people well for the next 10 years. My main calling was to preach the word. And that's where I learned how to preach. That's where I learned how to put sermons together. It was the necessity. A lot of times a pastor will come to you, brat, скажи слово, воскресенье. We say, no, I don't want to do it because it's work. But actually, if you serve and if you
Yeah.
prepare, it takes time and effort. You'll grow, and you'll grow also in authority in the eyes of your lead pastor. Because that's
I
what he
hate when,
wants.
yeah, I hate when it happens on Saturday. Can you preach tomorrow?
Yeah, but you know what? Deal with it. And God knows you only have one day. And you know what? For God, it's not a big deal. For us, they'll give me a month ahead. I'll put it in my Franklin calendar, my organizer. Forget that. I mean, you use that for business. But for Slavic churches, Paul says, be in season and out of season. Why did he say that? Because I think he saw that too.
Yeah. Here's an interesting question. In the day where there are many churches in your local community, would it be wise to remain in a Slavic church if you struggle to connect or fit in with that community of believers because of the language and the culture? So is it,
It's a good question. Listen, again, I hesitate to go on the record as in saying, go ahead, go to the American church. I hesitate. But if that's what's necessary for you to save your children, if that's what's necessary for you to progress with the Lord, well, you pray about it and you do what's on your heart to do, because no one's going to keep you against your will. And if you're sitting there and you're so unhappy and you're not being fed and you're frustrated, what can I say that would make you feel better? What can I tell you that will take away your frustration? But I'll tell you this one thing. You come to the church, look and see how you can pray that things would change for the better and be a part of that change in a very uplifting way, in a very servant spirit. If you can't do that, and if it's not up to you to do it, well, make your decision. And no one will blame you for wanting to get closer to God through the way that ministers to you. But don't give up yet, unless it's too late. You
another question? In recent years, there has been and continues to be a big exodus of younger generation leaving the Slavic churches. From your experience and observation, what are the main reasons for this? And can this
Number one
be?
reason. Number one reason And I did a Facebook quiz, and this came out as the #2 greatest need in Slavic churches. My pastor does not prepare good sermons. My pastor or the speakers do not prepare good sermons. That's why I put together a USB key filled with 7 video lessons, both in Russian separately and in English separately, with PowerPoints and PDFs to help them prepare better messages. Because some of the guys, they're not doing well, Alex. They get up there and they drone on. They start with generation and end up with revolution.
And I put up on the screen a little screenshot here where you guys can see. I encourage you to go to georgedaviduk.com and click on the details button, and you can see the details. It's a USB stick. I have one. George just gave it to me last weekend, so I'm looking forward to going through it. But I've kind of looked at it in little snippets. George, you want to talk about a little, like just touch on those 7 lessons?
Yes.
Yes. You talk about.
You know that David says, play skillfully to the Lord. Не як-небудь, как-нибудь. He says, learn how to practice the piano, learn guitar, play well, sing well. Well, I believe the same is true with speaking. My tongue is that of a skillful writer, said Paul when he wrote the Psalms. David was all about quality. And so if you improve your skills as a carpenter, you improve your skills as an engineer or a draftsman or a CAD designer, you go to school, you learn how to be good at what you do. Well, I think preaching is an art. It's an art, and it's a science. And there are certain basic rules. Well, principles, that's a better word. And if you learn them and you practice them, you'll be a better communicator. You'll be a better speaker. Whether or not you're even in the secular world, you're going to learn how to focus your thoughts a lot better and bring across the main idea of what you're trying to say, even to people at work. So it's not just for sermon building, but it's for communication.
Mm. So let's jump in. So we talked about, there's people are saying pastors don't prepare sermons and people are leaving churches. Can this be stopped? Was the second question of that person.
It can be ameliorated. Oh, that's a 50-cent word. It means it can be affected for change. It can. Not 100%, not from black to white, not like, whoa, my pastor sounds like Jim Cymbala. No, but at least they can try and they can give more room. I think that being in the Slavic church, the more you pray for your lead pastor, the more God can speak to his heart and change him. I've seen a lot of change in a lot of Slavic pastors, a lot. Others, they've dug in their heels, and what they did was double down on the conservative ideas that they have, which are basically cultural and not scriptural. And kids go there out of fear more than out of grace. I can't do anything about that, right? But I've seen a lot of Slavic pastors change for the better. Some things will not be changing in a snap of your fingers, My dad happened to be a great preacher. I was 10 years old. I fooled around in church, but my dad preached. I sat and I listened. He was good. Other pastors and preachers, not so much. What could you do? I mean, it's the reality. But prayer, tools will help. And I do believe that there's a room where you as a youth leader can greatly affect your church. Now, if you leave the church, you go to American church, they're not going to hire you. You're going to sit in the bench. Right? But here you could actually be useful to the Slavic community because they need you. So it depends, where's God leading you and how much of a servant do you want to be?
Wow.
Imagine me. Don't you think that I could have been among the Americans a long time ago? No. Don't you think I would have a better salary? Don't you think that I wouldn't be as well known, but I would have a niche and I'd be well taken care of? Yes. But God called me as a young boy. Then as a teenager, then as a young lead pastor at 29, and then as a missionary. I don't speak in American churches anymore. And whatever is collected by Slavic churches, which is never a lot, because they don't believe in what Americans believe in, giving their really good evangelists or preachers. Then my wife had to work most of her life. But I'm committed to Slavic people, and I'm committed to serving them from underneath. So I'm not telling you to do anything I didn't do. I could look for my own interests easily. But why am I speaking to kids 10 years old to 11, 14 years old? Do I have to do that? I'm retirement age, but I want to burn out for the Lord. I want to serve the Lord. I want God to use me to affect your generation. I'm on your webinar. Why? Why do I have to be on this webinar? Because I love God. God has directed me to love you, and I want to serve you today. Look, the electricity is out. I'm holding a cell phone with the flashlight on my face, and I'm still here. I don't give up, bro. I don't give up. So you're saying, oh, it's hard. My pastor doesn't love me. I think I'll go to an American. Man up a little bit. Be a man of God. Wow.
Come on.
Man, I'm preaching now. Oh, you don't know my pastor. No, maybe I don't. And I have compassion for you. Trust me. But man up. Be a man of God. You think it was easy for Daniel? You think it was easy for David when he had to run from Saul? You think it was easy for Jeremiah with the stubborn people? Ezekiel, people had a hard head. But God said, I'll make you with a hard head so you can minister to them. Minister with a heart like Jesus did. Yeah, Jesus' ministry went over gangbusters with the Jewish people. Oh, yeah. They all got saved, right? No. They crucified him. They spit on him. And yet he was faithful to the calling to go to the cross. I think we forget the message of the cross in our ministry. We like the crown. We like the glory. We like, yeah, man, everybody loves me in the American church. We do everything the way I like it. Yeah, who wants to go to carry a cross? Who wants to serve people that sometimes forget to say thank you or don't appreciate you? But earn the right to earn God's approval, and God will raise you up, and you will have the approval of your lead pastor and the people that you have influence over, as much as you know how to do. And that's what I want to leave you with. I want to leave you with, be faithful to God, be faithful to his calling for your life, serve. Those are all cliches, but the Holy Spirit is the one that's going to show you the way.
Yeah. Let me ask you another question. How can we become a church that is focused on the Great Commission, making disciples of all nations in the communities that we live in?
Okay, let me be super honest, because reality is reality. Russians don't come to our Russian services. Unsaved Ukrainians didn't come to our Ukrainian church. They say, "Мы маем нашу веру, мы имеем нашу веру." It was tough, but we still had a local radio broadcast, right? And then we took on missionaries. We started with 10 and we grew to 30 in 10 years, 30 missionaries. And it was all over the world, not just Slavic works. We had missionaries in South America. We had a missionary in Lebanon. We had missionaries in Europe. We had missionaries in Poland, and then the Soviet Union. We had missionaries in Brazil. So emphasize missions. Missions are so important. What we did, we put a map of the world, and we put photographs where we could of the people serving. And once a year, we had a missions convention, and we supported their missions consistently, never less than $100 a month, every month. And then we would ask them to send a report every 3 months or 6 months. And then people heard about our missionaries, what they're doing. So we became a mission-sending church. Victor Prochor is following that model, because I told him when he just became pastor. And because of that missions model, they are the #1 giving church for missions in the Slavic world. #1 church. Secondly, Their church grew from a couple of hundred people to 900, 1,000 members. They outgrew their building, and God blessed them to build another building, which we were at with you, Alex, and their mortgage is less than when they had the old building.
Yeah.
Why? I believe it's because of missions outreach. Again, that doesn't take away the responsibility of sharing personal evangelism. And by the way, that's the most effective. Friendship evangelism brings the most people to church. You know, small groups is another way to do effective evangelism. But world missions must be a part of your church. And I try to tell the lead pastors that, but a lot of them they don't get it. They don't see it. They don't have the vision for it.
Mm.
What can I say? It's a tough uphill battle.
Yeah, we have two more things quickly. We'll do one more question and then we're going to start wrapping up because George has something else to share with you guys. There's an interesting question, a little off topic, but I'm thinking to maybe touch on it because you've been around music all of your life. And
Yeah.
question, I have leading my youth is this movement of worship in church and youth. And the reason why I want to touch on this subject, because, there are questions still about this and they're legitimate, right? So I have leading my youth is this movement of worship in church youth, where we sing 3 songs for 20 minutes and then a prayer between, which sometimes seems to be repetitive. So my fear is that
Yeah.
worship comes from the heart, and I never want it to be a show and not something that our youth learn from American church in trying to manufacture feelings in order to lead to God. What is the right way to go about this?
Before I answer that question, I want to ask the person who asked that question, and I want to ask all of us who are involved in music, because I was involved with music. I led praise and worship in that church, but I was the lead pastor, so it was easier for me. Here's the question I want to ask. If you want people, excuse me, oh, sneeze.
Bless you.
If you want people, I heard you say God bless you, thank you. If you want people to worship, how much time do you spend in prayer with the Lord so that your worship, if you're leading it, is spirit led? Because you can't give what you don't have. The apostles, when they preached, they had authority. Same thing is true with music. When do we have authority in our music or in our songs or in our worship? When we're part of it. When we actually pray. And when we pray, not just 5 minutes or 10 minutes, excuse me, but when we really pray and say, God, I want there to be an atmosphere of praise. We think that a new chorus is the key. That's cool. The Bible says sing a new song. We think that a catchy song will, but sometimes even the hymns, we never let go of the hymns. We always kept the hymns. And we would mix one hymn with the newest choruses. Another thing, be careful with the new stuff. Pick the choruses that are easy to remember, not the complicated ones. Pick the ones that are easy to learn. And I'm not afraid of the word repetitive because a lot of the hymns have been singing for 100 years, but they're powerful. Some of the choruses that are very effective, we've sung them for 10 years ever since I remember. But pray before you make a playlist or your song list of praise and worship. Because it's more important that you have the power of the Spirit on the songs you choose and the way you lead it than some tricky, catchy new stuff that someone else put out. It's not gonna touch people's hearts. I think that people have made the mistake. As long as I sing a new chorus or I sing a chorus everybody's popular, that is going to go well. It's praise and worship. Wait a minute. Just like a preacher has to pray, a worship leader has to pray. And if you don't do it, you don't get the results.
Yeah. It's interesting. I just did this weekend when I was in Seattle, and this young worship band was leading the worship, and I just felt like coming to the guys that led the worship team, and I said, "You guys did such an amazing job, beautiful voices, and they did this beautiful music was really, really. I'm a musician. I love music. I
Right,
sang
right,
in
right,
worship, um, but a lot of times what I teach or talk to these worship leaders, I say, just like you said, you guys really need to start spending time with God. And it's one thing to have the music going and lights or whatever you guys do, you know. It's one thing to just even have good songs, but it's another thing to really feel the heart of God in these songs.
Oh, amen.
And,
Amen.
and another thing that I've been telling a lot of youth leaders, I said, God have given us so many talents, and but we're not tapping into the spiritual gifts. Why not, just like you said, George, when you prepare for worship, why not ask God, when I'm going to be on the stage today, can you speak to me prophetically? You know,
Amen.
I mean, Holy Spirit wants to,
Yeah.
touch the people that are listening. They're
Open there.
right. And I encourage you, I encourage the leaders, and I encourage these guys in Seattle. I said, guys, really go up to the next step. Spend time with
Yeah.
God. Ask him what he wants to say to the people that are right there. And a lot of times you can have sing a hymn, and through that hymn, you can impact so many people. And when you just feel the heart of God, and you just words and the prophecy, maybe words of knowledge can flow through you. That's very powerful. So that's
Powerful.
really what we
Powerful.
need.
Powerful. Did you hear the thunder?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah, I saw the lighting as well.
Oh my goodness.
So, George, we're out of time, and that's cool. Time flies by so quick. The way I want to finish this is you have such a big father's heart, and I've learned from ministers like you, and you've poured into me so many times, even though it's on a distance. But when we just even seeing you last weekend, and you go, what, Alex, I still pray for you.
Yeah,
That
me
stuff
too.
is very powerful. I mean, it's really powerful. And I wish that there's more pastors, leaders like you. So just from that, fatherly heart that you have. There's a bunch of youth leaders, and we have, a bunch of people watching us, and there's different groups that are sitting in church and watching us. Um, can you please speak to youth leaders that are watching? And obviously, there are probably some of them that maybe are not doing so well. And we talked about relationships, and we
Right.
talked about some tough questions, and translation, and just maybe disorganization or whatever. And sometimes, I mean, I know I've been in places where I wanted to give up on ministry, and it's been challenging. And can you just speak a little bit to that, and speak to the leaders that are watching?
I'll speak to you from my heart. And I strive to do this. We measure success by our effectiveness or how people respond to us or how many people get saved or what changes come because we said something or we preached something. But that's not how God measures success. Case in point, Jonah had a bad attitude. He ran from God. God forced him to preach the message to Nineveh. 120,000 people got saved. And Jonah was still angry and had a bad attitude. And he sat on a hill and he pouted. Noah, on the other hand, had very little effectiveness. He only saved his own family. People didn't listen and they mocked him. Our success is not measured by numbers or what we measure success by. Our success is measured by God. And let me tell you this, that first, please the Lord and not man. That doesn't mean to disregard or disrespect man. No, it means to so honor the Lord that it's your heart desire to please him. When you put God in the place of God and you learn a servant's attitude, and it affects people around you, and it'll affect your leadership, and they will see that God is with you. Look at Joseph. He got sold by his brothers. He got betrayed by a woman. He went through that test. He was forgotten by a guy in jail that he helped. But when the time came, God was forming him. You see, God uses adversity. God uses rejection. God uses lack of success. God uses, jail for Joseph, a collar of iron on his neck, bands of iron on his wrists. And the word of the Lord tested Joseph until the word of the Lord came to pass. If God's given you a word, he's called you, young man. He has told you, and in your moment of dedication, you said yes to God, and you cried, and you knelt at the altar, and you raised your hand. You said, I'll go, Lord, and I'll do it. And then God tests you, and you fall apart. You complain, and you say, oh, it's hard. Well, nothing's harder than the cross. Nothing's harder than Calvary. But remember your call. Remember that God told you to go forward. Remember that God called you. And one last thing. The thing that I worry about the most is the reputation of God today. People have such a wrong concept of God as Father. And I represent God. And so I have to get my attitudes more like God's. And I have to learn what the character of God is like so I can represent him carefully. You see, it's not my good character that will touch your heart. It's not my heart that's the Father's heart. It's the Father's heart that has broken me, has melted me, has shown me how proud I could be, how selfish I could be, how self-pitying I could be, feel sorry for myself. But you know what? That's not going to change anybody's heart or anybody's life. You're not going to change everybody, but minister to the people that God gives you. Do for the few that you would love to do for the many. And whatever influence I have, I'm going to represent God correctly. Because God is good. God is kind. God is humble. God is rich. God is filled with grace. He doesn't care how dim the lights are or how cool the music is. Those who worship him worship in spirit and truth. And that's what I want, young man, from your life. Get back on your knees. Remember your passion. Go back to your first love. Say, God, use me. And let me tell you what, you will go farther than me. You will do more than me because your generation is the generation that will see the coming of Jesus Christ. God bless you as you do that. Thank you for the opportunity, Alex.
Yeah, George, we're so blessed. Thank you so much for your time. And it's crazy how you're sitting there in the dark with your cell phone. Thank you. You didn't give up on
Who
us.
cares?
That's cool. So,
No,
well, guys,
no. God bless you.
thank you. Thank you so much, George. And guys, check out George's website, georgewduke.com, and grab those lessons. I think they'll be great benefit, and you guys will be blessed. Thank you, everyone. George, thank you so much for your time, and until next time.
You're so welcome. Got it.
Bye.
Blessings. Bye-bye.